Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and today I'm here with my friend Brent Hayter. Brent is a clinical therapist, and I thought it would be really fun for us to bounce some ideas around together from the perspective of a coach and a therapist, and hopefully give some guidance or some new ideas, new ways of thinking about a really big topic that both of us hear about in our practices. And that topic is anxiety. So welcome, Brent. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background?
First of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here, Pam. Anytime I get to spend a little time with Pam is so valuable and inspiring, and I really appreciate you fitting me in or finding a way for me to be here. Yeah, my background, prior to becoming a therapist, I was a middle school teacher for 25 years, worked with teenagers. And I also owned and ran a strength and conditioning personal training company for probably 8 or 10 years, and worked in that field as well, probably for the 20 of my 25 years that I was teaching. And I was never much of an academic teacher. I wouldn't say my specialty, if you will, would be making connections with kids. So I taught a lot of programs that gave me more opportunities to do things like that. Behavior, PE, ran a hockey academy for a few years. And just being of service. I mean, you know what that's all about, being of service to others, and that's what drew me to teaching middle school and staying in middle school for so long.
Okay, so
We
I just
talk to
want
other
to chime in
teachers.
here and say,
Yeah,
thank God for people like you, because when my kids were teenagers, I was like, I pray for all the people that will take my children for 6 hours a day. My kids are
yeah,
great. I love them. And you're a special kind of person that wants to do that.
yeah. You know what? It's a high energy job, but it was very worthwhile, and I enjoyed it while I was doing it, and then kind of grew out of it a little bit.
Mhm.
And because training is kind of being of service, and teaching is kind of being of service, and I just was a natural transition for me to um, want to become a therapist. And I finally made the leap to deciding to do that after I took your 200-hour yoga teacher certification and coaching course, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty, when we invest in ourselves, I always say the transformation happens in the transaction. Like when we finally say yes to ourselves and we put some money where our mouth is, so to speak, it's not even really about the training. The training's great, by the way, if you ever want to do a 200-hour yoga teacher training. Ours
It's
is
great.
great. And it's really more so like you deciding to invest in yourself. And that just, it changes how we are in the world, and great things always come after that. So
Mm,
I
agreed.
feel very privileged that you chose to invest in yourself through our programs, because we get to stay connected. And for everyone listening, Mr. Hayter was my youngest son's teacher in school, and one of his favorite teachers. And I just find that a really sweet connection.
He is such a neat kid as an adult too.
Anyhow, let's get to our topic today. So I know as a therapist, probably I'm going to guess, I don't know, not being one, but I'm going to guess based on the percentage of people that come to me with this complaint, it's probably a large portion of what you do is deal with people who are grappling with anxiety. Do you see a lot of people with anxiety, Brent?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's, especially in the day and age that we live in, it's just part of the human condition that you're going to be affected in some way between anxious feelings and depressed feelings. So yeah, I get a lot of that in my practice.
So anxiety and depression are part of the human experience. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just, we're all human beings, and we're all going to go through stuff,
Mhm.
and our brains and our nervous systems are super tricky, and so it's really easy to go one way or the other if we're not aware, we're not educated, and yeah, I mean, our lived experiences will play into that as well.
I'm so happy you said that, because I believe the same thing. I think that a big part of the problem of anxiety is that we think we shouldn't have it. I think that a
Hmm.
great deal of the fear around it and the I must medicate, I must do this thing, something about it is because we believe it shouldn't happen. And people don't embrace the totality of the human experience. There are times when being depressed is completely appropriate.
Yeah,
Your
I would
grandma
I would
passes
agree.
away, you should be sad. Maybe you
Yeah.
you lose your job and you're not sure what's next and you feel inadequate. You may go through a period of depression. You might
Hmm.
experience anxiety because you're worried about fitting in at a new job. These are normal parts. And how much do
Yeah.
you think this society of comparison, where we're so comparative on social media, where we're looking at what everybody else has, is contributing
Yeah.
to this idea that we shouldn't have anxiety? Is that a big factor?
Oh, I feel that is part and parcel to a lot of mental health struggles these days, is that we are now living in a time that our brains are not really evolved to live in. There's so much stimulus and there's so much comparison and there's so much self judgment and other judgment that it creates anxiety in itself. Just the pace and the noise and the busyness and the stimulation of walking around as a human being in North America can be anxiety inducing because your nervous system gets so overwhelmed. Now throw in all of these things with social media about people only putting their best day ever or pretending like they're having their best day ever and renting cars so they can put up posts, and sends the message to all of us that if you aren't happy 100% of the time and if you don't have these things, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
When there's not the emotions, there's nothing wrong. There really are no bad emotions. There's just information, because that's your body and your brain trying to tell you you need to pay attention to something.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think in the coaching realm, I teach that there are two kinds of anxiety. There's neurotic anxiety, which is that comparative kind of like, will I fit in? Will they like me? Are they judging me? What
Mm.
do other people think of me? That's sort of a neurosis, and it's not useful. That anxiety is not useful. And then there's what I call wisdom anxiety. And that's actually your body, your nervous system saying you're either doing something you shouldn't be doing, or you're not doing something you should be doing. So for instance, you're overstimulated, overwhelmed because there's just too much coming at you. Well, your nervous system might be saying like, go take a nap.
Mm.
What do you think about
And
that?
I think that really connects with what I was saying about how busy society is and how much stimulation is over time, we've gotten so far away from the essence of being a human being that we don't listen to our bodies. And the message is that, if you're hustling and if you're trying, do the things and achieve success, you just go, 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 go. And in your free time, you do exciting stuff. That's go, 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 go. And we forget that we need to just take time to be with ourselves and have time for, reflection and introspection. And yeah, so I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and that's not celebrated in our society though. It's not celebrated in our culture, this hustle. Like, and you know what I have to say? I'm the same with cancel culture. I said it in my interview with Ryan there. Fuck cancel culture. And I say fuck hustle culture. We have to have consistent habits. Consistency creates momentum, which creates change over the long term. But we can't
Mm.
sustain healthily the level of hustle that's being portrayed as the holy grail of success.
Mm.
I don't think it's sustainable for any human being.
No, I mean, especially if the holy grail of success has been framed for us by people outside of us and outside of our connected group, that success means you have unlimited money and unlimited opportunities and that you can't be happy in your life unless you have all of these things.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, I love that you just said that. It's like when we try to get our idea of success externally is given to us by something other than what comes within us. And what I see as a yoga teacher in particular, and of course in my coaching practices, people are so disconnected from their bodies because they're brainwashed into this hustle culture. So they're always looking outside of themselves. they're not even aware of these signals coming from their bodies of maybe some dis-ease until it becomes a clinically diagnosable level of anxiety.
I see that all the time in practice. Actually, one of the first, after we kind of get to know each other early on in a therapeutic relationship, I'm asking people, oh, how does that feel in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And some people look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, and and it connects to our lived experiences as a child when our nervous system is developing. If we were exposed to certain parenting styles or certain traumas or things that were hard, we've got fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's what our body, the survival part of our body knows. And when you're little, you can't flee. You need the adults around you. You can't fight. You're too little. So you learn to just push those feelings down and ignore. And then you get to be an adult and stuff's bubbling up that you've been resisting your whole life. And you don't know, you can't feel it in your body. And then you start trying to label it and you panic. And that's, it can come from that.
So this is a really interesting question that just popped into my mind. As a teacher, what do you think the value would be of stop teaching home ec or maybe not home ec, but stop teaching some of the useless shit that gets taught in school and teach kids how to regulate their nervous system? Would that help to make more functional adults? Because I think if we don't learn how to regulate our nervous systems in childhood, we're doomed to experience a mental health crisis in our lives.
Yeah, which you look all around society. That's why we are at where we're at because of we didn't know. Our parents and their parents didn't know. And now we're starting to learn so much about neuroscience and the nervous system and and how to self-soothe and regulate. I totally agree with you. They actually have started a new in school district 23 in Kelowna anyways, and in some other school districts in the province, they've started up social emotional learning teachers, and they're starting to make that so that people have to take some actual courses. It might not be the counselor at the school, but they have to take some courses around, mindfulness and self-regulation and those sorts of things. And I think the most valuable place for that is elementary school. For children, the most powerful time of their development is that first 3 years where they're attaching to the people that they're loved by and feeling secure and all those sorts of things. But that first, 7 to 9 years is so powerful for helping them self-regulate or understand what's happening. Their brains are not developed. Well, none of our brains are developed until we're, well, for us, for guys, it's later on.
25 or something.
Actually, females, it's kind of like 24 to 26. For
Mm-hmm.
males, it's like 27 to 29. And that's if there's not any neuroatypicality, like no sort of like OCD or ADHD or anything like that.
That explains why all my boys were a little not as smart as they could be. I'll just be really kind until they got a little older.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is that we all know that the social substances that we like to put into our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going through that in your late teens, early 20s and partying pretty hard, that also delays how long it takes for your fully mature adult brain to be developed. And the last piece to get developed is your frontal lobe, your neurocortex, the part that helps you think about things and notice things about your body and observe and not react and live in fight or flight your whole life. So
there has to be a movement around it in some way. And that's why I want to have conversations like this. My hope is that people will listen to these things and get curious about, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm having an experience that I just never learned how to deal with. I never learned any self-regulation. I never learned any self-soothing or coping. I didn't learn how to express myself because it wasn't safe to express myself. But these are skills that I can learn. And also that anxiety is part of the normal human experience. Because in yoga, we say what we resist persists and what we embrace dissolves. And so I have found it really helpful to notice when I have anxiety, to just notice where I feel it in my body, and to kind of do weird yoga stuff like say, okay, anxiety, what are you trying to teach me? And just in giving it that voice for a moment, I'm not now controlled by it. What do you think about embodiment practices like that for people?
I think it's very powerful. And actually, I stole that phrase from you, Pam. I use that with my clients fairly often. What we resist persists.
Hmm.
And it's so powerful because realistically, that's how our brain works. The majority of our brain is about keeping us alive,
Hmm.
right? Whether
Yeah.
that's keeping our internal systems running or whether that's protecting us from danger or trying to interpret danger. Those parts of our brain, they don't really have a very good language to communicate with the thinking parts of our brain. So it's all feelings that are stored from what's happened to us, right? And so we get these feelings that we don't understand where they're coming from, or we get these thoughts and we think, well, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to think that. And I put it down. But essentially what you're doing is you're making your brain go, wait, this is important. There's all sorts of emotion that's coming with this topic or this experience. I'm doing a good job if I pay attention to it.
Hmm.
And then that puts your focus and that makes that dominate your thoughts. And if that's a thought that's really negative or self-deprecating or anxiety inducing, then that part of your brain starts creating more of those thoughts. And
Yeah.
instead of anxious feelings, you have anxiety and you end up with an anxiety disorder or something like that.
I did some of my training with Tony Robbins, and he's famous for saying that anxiety is a problem of focus most of the time. It's like where
Where you put it.
attention, that lines up with the yogic teachings of where attention goes, energy flows. And then the more brain science part of it is the reticular activating system. Whatever we
Mm-hmm.
focus on, the brain says, oh, that's important to you. I'll show you more of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll get into like what we can do about these things in a minute, but I want our listeners to kind of be able to go, oh, there's a lot going on. Anxiety isn't just this kind of like, we use this blanket term, but there's the nervous system component, so a physiological component of,
Mm-hmm.
you said our brain as part of the nervous system is invested in keeping this meat suit safe, right? Just this
Yeah.
meat
Meat
suit
suit. Yeah.
alive. It
I love
doesn't
it.
care about you thriving, it cares about surviving, and it only has reference to the past. We can say, okay, well, this looks similar to an old scenario, so that must be that. And that's kind of how the
Mm-hmm.
brain does it. So anytime we enter into any new scenario, it's natural that we're going to feel some anxiety because the nervous system is going alarm, alarm, alarm. We haven't experienced this before. We don't know what to do. And if we can embrace just understanding that as we go into new space, new territory, as we challenge the status quo, it's normal to experience that. I think that's powerful. Secondly, we have the psychological component, right? Like we have subconscious seeds planted in us about what's good or bad or right or wrong from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go against those subconscious seeds, even if we know consciously, I don't, for instance, if didn't share the same political view as my father, and I know that what I think is right for me, but every time I say something about it or go against it, my body will likely have anxiety because I had that indoctrinated into my psyche growing up. So
Yeah.
there's that component. And then we have the chemical component, the chemistry. We look for dopamine. We look to get hits
Oh,
of dopamine, which is like, that's in the kind of the wanting of something.
yeah.
And there's a little bit of anxiety in the wanting of something. And we actually get even addicted to that feeling. So there's
Yeah.
a lot going on in our meat suits.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that part of our brain too, like you say about wanting something at the base, we're socially connected organisms. Human beings want to be connected. They want to belong. They want to be safe. And if you go back far enough in time, that meant you had to be accepted by other people or else you might be dead, right? Like if you're living in a cave or you're in a tribe, nomadic tribe, and you're moving around and all of a sudden the people don't like you anymore because you don't do what they want you to do or something, you're out. Well, now
Yeah.
it's just you and the nature and the wilderness. And we're evolved like that. We're wired like that. We want to connect and want to be accepted. And if we feel threats to that, our body remembers what that's like. And we can't really put a memory with it a lot of the time because memories really are not that accurate
No.
when you come right down to it, right?
I heard
Memories are
I heard once
super
that
inaccurate.
the only time you actually truly remember something is immediately after it happened. And every time you remember it after that, it's a memory of the last memory you had. And so it's altered. It's kind of like a game of telephone. It was the guy who wrote Unfuck Yourself that talked about
Oh
that.
yeah.
I thought it was really interesting.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing. You and I can be in the same place at the same time and go through the exact same experience and create totally different memories from it.
Yeah.
Because based on what's happened to you in your life and what's happened to me in my life since I was born, my brain is taking all that information and then checking what's going on in my whole body and hearing and trying to put that all together and interpret what's happening in front of me right now. So, I mean, if I have purple glasses on, I'm going to see that purple things happen.
Yeah.
Like and if you have green glasses on, you're going to see what green things happen. And our minds are so powerful with memories like that.
So getting back to this connection thing, because I think we're really onto something here that I see. There's something, I mean, we're talking about human beings need connection, and the deepest kind of connection where we trust one another, where we have a space to be seen and heard and known, and we trust that someone, the hunter in the tribe is going to bring back meat and share it with us. And we trust that, the members of our tribe want the best for us. But what I see now is not so much a movement toward connection, but a movement toward fitting in, trying to fit in. So different than connection, just trying not to be rejected. So different than moving towards like vulnerable, heartfelt, nourishing connection, just trying not to get kicked out of the tribe. So fitting in versus belonging. And so we say we want connection, but what we're really exhibiting as far as our behavior is protection. We protect ourselves.
We're trying to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And that creates so much anxiety for people because you're trying to act a certain way, dress a certain way, represent yourself a certain way so that you'll be accepted or, not shunned. But what's happening is the anxiety is for a lot of people is coming from is that this doesn't feel authentic to me. This does not feel like me. And so you're trying to connect. You're not letting people see the true value of you. It's like I had a client once and this person was really struggling, relationship stuff and a lot of attachment things. And we were talking quite a bit about connection and, kind of came down to, well, this core belief, if I'm not good enough, nobody's going to love me. And I said, well, somebody's going to love you. And if you get in a relationship and this person and you don't align and they just kind of go like, oh, you're not good enough for me, or they say something hurtful or put it on you that it's not working. How great. There's billions of other people in this world that you could just be yourself and connect with. And you don't have to spend any more of your time with that person. They've given you the gift. They could have just kept stringing you along for 3 years and whatever, but they didn't. They left. So that's an opportunity. That's what can you learn from that? What are you feeling? How do you process?
What do you think about, because you just said it, like we're so busy trying to fit in and survive. The nervous system's interested in our surviving, but not our thriving. And I think for us to thrive, we need connection, not just fitting in. We need real belonging and we need real connection. And that requires that we're authentic. Now, there's a trade-off when we try to fit in. We have to stifle parts of ourselves, stuff them down, cut off parts of ourselves. We are being inauthentic. What do you see as the role of inauthenticity in contributing to like poor mental health and anxiety and everything that goes with it?
I think that when they come right down to it, inauthenticity comes from this inherent sense of shame that human beings carry around with them. We pick up little messages when we're younger, the lies that our brain just creates because our little brains are just trying to figure out things and they can't. And your brain's job is to make sense. So you could hear a parent say something, you can watch something happen, and then you make a rule or a story about that in your head, and you feel bad, like somehow, is it my fault? Am I, that shame? And so we have this shame that we don't love ourselves and we don't want to show people who we really are because of that. And that leads to being inauthentic, right?
Yes.
It's like everybody loves to talk about narcissism nowadays.
Oh God, everybody's calling everybody a narcissist. They don't even know what it means.
Yeah. But realistically, when you come right down to it, if someone is actual narcissistic, people think, oh, they have this overinflated view of themselves and this and that and the other thing. And really what comes down to it, those are the people who are have so much shame and so much insecurity and so much trauma and damage that they can never show up for themselves.
Yeah.
They have to try and take the stuff from everybody else. Right. So yeah, inauthenticity is a huge connection to anxiety. You're afraid to feel what might be there to feel. So then you hide it. You pretend to be something you're not. It doesn't make the
So
shame voices go away.
I love this. Shame grows in dark places. The things we try to hide about ourselves create shame. And these, like, I think there's great value in us examining our own shame, confronting it, facing it, turning and facing the lion, if you will, being willing to sort of be consumed by the feelings we get in order to be authentic. I know in my own life, you're talking about memories, and this memory flashed into my mind, so I'm going to share it. And it's such a stupid thing, but it's as a little kid, my dad's a musician. He played guitar, and we had always musicians in our house, like big jam sessions every weekend and lots of professional musicians all the time. And I just wanted to be a part of that, you know? And so I took guitar lessons and I wanted to learn. And I remember getting a guitar for, I think it was my 9th birthday. And I was so excited that my dad got me a guitar. Like my mom obviously went out and picked it up, you know, but I was like, my dad got me a guitar. Now I'm going to belong with my dad. And then I was in bed, but I was like listening as little kids do. And my dad's best friend, a musician, came over and he said, "Oh, let me see Pam's new guitar." And my dad said, "Oh, it's just a piece of shit." It broke my heart. And I thought, you know what I made that mean in that moment? Like, I'm not I'm not worthy of having nice things. And so I started to alter myself a little bit to become more like my dad, to get more love from him. There were just like lots of moments like that. And I'm sure everyone listening has moments like that. I'm not making this a big deal. It's just a good example of how those things happen. And that's when it starts, the inauthenticity, you know, you start going, I can't be the way I am. So I'll try to be something else so that I get love and avoid rejection.
And not only that, you've now framed your brain to look for things that prove that meaning you created about that situation is accurate.
Yeah.
Which alters your memories, which alters how you see the world and experience reality. If I'm a kid and I'm 5 and I hear my dad say, "Oh, that freaking kid, he's driving me crazy. He's the worst. I wish we never had him," or whatever, because he's had a few drinks. Doesn't mean anything. I hear that. I think, "Oh, my dad doesn't love me. I'm not lovable."
Yeah.
And then I look for proof. Anytime my dad's mad about anything, I think he's mad at me.
Yeah.
Because that's what I believe.
Right.
I've got a really interesting story that frames how our memories are formed and how these lies are perpetuated. But I had a client. This person was in his like 40s, 30s or 40s, and his core belief was that kind of like what I was saying, that he wasn't loved, that his parents didn't love him. He was like the least valued member of his family. He came from a fairly big family. And so he had this memory about when he was a kid, about the fact that he knew no one loved him, so he ran away. And nobody came to look for him. His mom, his dad, nobody came to look for him. And after hours, realizing nobody cared, he came back to his house and the door was locked. And he remembered, oh, it's Mother's Day. They're going to Mother's Day dinner. It's a small town, so he starts walking because he knows where they're going. And on the way back, he sees the family coming back from dinner because it's been hours. They didn't stop and pick him up. They let him walk home. And then he got in trouble. And this was his memory that he had, why he was not valued by his family. I said, well, you should talk to your parents about that. Like, not accusational or confrontational, or your siblings about that. And so he did. He came back and he said, "You're not going to believe this. That never happened to me. That happened to my older sibling. When he was the age that I remember it, and I was 2 or 3 years younger." But his little brain couldn't wrap his mind around. He was so worried about his sibling, and he was so worried about, what does this mean? My parents don't even care about him. And then over time, his brain just changed it and changed it.
Yeah, wow.
And that was his whole existence, with struggling with anxiety his whole life, about not being loved and not being accepted for just being himself. And that's how powerful brains can be. if
Yeah.
as parents we don't help kids interpret the stuff that's going on for them.
So I think that this leads us really into a good space to start. Like, I think we've given people kind of a good understanding of how easy it is to become anxious, and it's normal. And I'm certain that there are times when medicating anxiety is the right thing to do. I'm not here to talk about that. But for the general population, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at, oh, it's my nervous system signaling that there's something for me to look at here. And I'm going to give you my top 3 things that I recommend based on kind of my spiritual practices and the things that I talk about in coaching. And then I'd love for you to give some tips on what people can do about anxiety to help them better integrate it into their whole being. So the first thing that I say to people is get connected with your body. Because if you've abandoned your body, it's going to scream at you all the time. And if you're abandoning it and it's whispering, there's something wrong, it'll eventually scream. And I think that when we suppress that, we cause major disease, autoimmune disease, all kinds of physical ailments. And so do something that gets you connected with your body daily. And that's why I love practices like yoga, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be running. It can be anything physical where you're paying attention to your body. So that's number 1 for me. Number 2, and I'll tell you what, the embodiment piece, me going through all the yoga that I did, saved my life. I had so much shame about so many things, poor choices in my life, terrible marriage, my kid being an addict, like so much shame. And I think I would have wound up probably in the psych ward if I wasn't doing yoga every single day. I had a practice of embodiment where I had a place that was safe to feel in my body and let things move through me. Didn't mean I had it all figured out, but it sure helped. So number 2 that I think is really important is confronting your shame. I think everyone should write the story of their life and investigate it and investigate their memories and really like seek the truth, right? Like when I wrote my book and I put it out there, I almost threw up when I hit publish, Like I actually almost threw up.
What have I done? What have I done?
Totally. And then I realized like no one cares. Right. And then I had this revelation. I'm like, I just took everything that I was afraid of is what other people would say about me or think about me. And I just took that narrative back. It's mine. There's nothing anyone can tell about me now that I haven't told. So there's nothing, there's no shame anymore. It dissolved. It came out into the light of day. So I think learning to tell your stories in safe spaces and seeking the truth is really, really important. And then the last thing I think about is mindfulness. Like, what am I focusing on? If you have a big experience of anxiety, instead of trying to run away from it, pause and reflect. What was I just focusing on? What was I just thinking about? So now we make a connection. Oh, when I focus on that thing, I'm creating anxiety in my body. I'm causing the emotion and the experience of anxiety. And what else could I put my attention on that might feel better for me right now? And then we realize, oh, I have power. This thing is not happening to me. I'm right now present to the experience of anxiety, but it's different than saying I have anxiety. So I think embodiment, confronting your shame in some way, and that means like get a therapist, you guys, get a coach, go see Brent. and then mindfulness. What do those line up for you?
Yeah, you just stole all my answers, Pam.
I'm sure you have a different lens though. So what are some practical things people can do if they're experiencing anxiety?
I think the first thing that I try to bring to, other than just holding space and being accepting of my clients and just being there with them, the first thing I try to get them to do is start being curious about their thoughts. Yeah. Because so many of us have thinking errors that we've been using since we were tiny, or what do we call, in therapist speak, we call them cognitive distortions, ways that we see the world, like all or nothing thinking or mind reading.
I like how you said it better. What did you say? Errors in thinking.
Yeah, thinking errors.
Thinking errors, yeah. I still have some of those.
We all do. It's part of being a human being. I can
Yeah.
give you a list of like 20 of them and you'll be like, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. But the
Yeah.
thing is about being aware. So
Hmm.
being aware of your thoughts and
So
just observing them.
curiosity
Hmm
and
Be,
inquiry.
be
Okay. Got it.
curious. Yep.
Yeah.
Be curious and be an observer
Yeah.
of yourself. And probably the second, like I'm a huge advocate of mind body connection as well. So every one of my clients, we practice, breath work and, a few different breathing techniques to help manage the protection side of your nervous system. Because understanding that most emotions that we think have so much meaning, it's just a biochemical reaction, physiological response of our body. And all it is saying to us is, you got to pay attention to something,
Hmm.
right? But in that primitive part of our brain, it just thinks, oh, this is different or strange or scary. It's got to be dangerous. This could
Hmm.
kill you. And then we have adrenaline response from that and we have to deal with it. So the mind body connection is huge. And,
But I
and
love that you said
so,
breath practices because when we're in fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system is amped up. It's jacked.
mhm,
It's like your sympathetic nervous system got a bad meth habit. That's like basically what happens.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
when we do breathing practices in yoga, it's called pranayama, but we activate and stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's
hmm
responsible for feelings of peace and well being. And I think it's just a weak muscle for most of us.
yeah. Well, when I say to clients, I'm like, listen, pretend you're a caveman. If you were getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to sit and go,
Yeah.
and close your eyes and do breath work. So your nervous system, you start doing that, your nervous system immediately goes like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this isn't what I thought was going on. And
Yeah.
then we can when our when our fight or flight system kind of kicks in, we can't think logically anymore. We
Mhm.
can't go like, oh, I'm curious, what's that about? So like people have to get connected to their body. I'm a huge advocate of exercise, whatever lights you up, some sort of movement and
Mhm.
exercise. So I feel like I'm stealing your answers.
No,
And
you're giving
and
really great context to them in different angles. I love it.
and the most simple thing for me is with the mindfulness. So often I see people who, I mean, that word is just thrown around so much. Like a lot of people say mindfulness. Oh, well, yeah, that means I got to be spiritual and I got to sit and I got to do all these things. And I'll just say like, okay, what's your thing that makes you not think about anything else than what you're in? Oh, riding my Harley. I don't
Mhm.
think about anything. I just ride the Harley. Okay, you're being mindful. The
Mhm.
thing that you're doing is taking all your focus and attention. So if you can do that in everything that you're doing, you can avoid the anxiety. You can avoid the depression. If we spend time trying to predict or control or influence what hasn't happened yet based on old knowledge that we've picked up through our whole lives, we create that anxiety in our body.
Mhm.
If we spend our time thinking about all things that are in the past that we have nothing to do with, we actually create depression.
Yeah.
So by staying mindful in the moment, experiencing what you're doing as deeply and as thoroughly as you can, you would avoid the stuff on the edges, the anxiety and the depression.
Yeah, the two kind of bipolarities of that we get batted towards if we're not mindful. To me, one of the greatest mindfulness exercises that I give people is something simple like say, well, find 5 blue things in front of you. Or
Mhm.
notice your 5 senses. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you hear? And what do you most predominantly feel? And just in the act
Mhm.
of putting your brain into that thing, now you're mindful of something that's happening in the moment. Because anxiety is catastrophizing, right? Anxiety is really like us projecting worst case scenario based on calculated probabilities from our past that might not have anything to do with what's going on in the present. And then we're projecting that
Uh,
into the future and we get paralyzed.
Well, and especially if there's any trauma. Like if there's any trauma, something could smell a certain way or sound a certain way, or a breeze could blow or somebody could laugh and you have no clue, but it's connected to something and you're all of a sudden you're in fight or flight mode, right? So we need to do those things to ground ourselves in those moments. So yeah.
So I think like those are all really good starting points for people to deal with anxiety. But I want to talk now, just before we wrap everything up, about the real cost of not dealing with our anxiety. Because if anxiety is predominantly errors in thinking, catastrophizing, focusing on the wrong things. And we're so wired to fit in, and we're living these sort of inauthentic lives. We're consumed by creating an identity of someone that can fit in. But then we buy into this myth that that's who we are. And to me, that's the greatest loss. We give up our true power as creators, because you and I can recreate. I can claim a new identity. I could say, I want to become a rock climber who's really gregarious and outgoing and studies Spanish. I could do that, and I could go do all those things and claim that identity for myself. I'm not stuck.
Yeah.
I don't have roots like a tree. But we perpetuate this anxious, trying to fit in. This is just my personality. It's how I am. I've always been anxious. So to me, the cost of staying in anxiety, the cost of unexamined anxiety, is that we lose our power, which is the greatest power of our lives, and that is to create and cause who you are on purpose, in alignment with your divine assignment. You know, like who you were born to be.
Yeah.
You get to decide that. But if you're so busy trying to fit into the tribe, you miss that. And that would be, to me, the greatest tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, that, for me, that connects to when we're stuck in those places and we're trying to be who we think we need to be or we should be. Sometimes we're resisting things too much. I mean, this isn't a therapeutic perspective, but a spiritual perspective is sometimes we want something so bad. We want to fit in. We want to be successful. But it's somebody else's version of that. We're trying so hard to do what we think we're supposed to do, or what we should do, or what we have to do, that we don't give life a chance to happen. We don't give the universe a chance to just kind of go like, hey, go this way. It's like a wise woman once said to me, hey, it's okay to try easy. You don't have to try hard all the time. Sometimes, I wonder who that was. Sometimes it's okay to not be fighting against everything all the time and just kind of go with the flow. Which doesn't mean give up on your values or anything like that, but just means like observe, become curious, and stop fighting for something that maybe isn't meant for you.
Well, that's the thing. You just said values. Often we just pick up values from our families and from society, and we take them on subconsciously without even realizing. And then we wonder why we feel anxious all the time, because we've never actually paused to examine, do those values actually fit for me? Are they authentic to me? And I think every one of us at different life phases, like for instance, I'm just have become an empty nester. And I actually had to go like, okay, I need to take a look at what I have been valuing, which was being everything I could to make these young men great. And then I had to look and say, okay, well, who am I now that I'm not there? And what do I need to value at this next stage of my life? And what I really got to was, I value my freedom, like autonomy, and I value impact. And so I can write a book and create a podcast and coach people and impact, and I can put all my attention there because those are the things that I value. And yes, I still value my relationships with my boys, but it's not the top value in my life right now because they're out doing their own thing as they should be. But I know many moms in my situation that still try to make that their top value, and they're constantly anxious because when their son gets married and they feel on the side, now they don't feel like they belong to the tribe anymore because they haven't re-examined their values at each life phase. So I think that's a small component of anxiety, is when life changes, when the phases change, we have to look and go, oh, what do I actually need to value at this next stage of my life to feel aligned for where I'm going?
Well, and I would add on to that if we don't stop to look at what we truly value and understand and think about why we believe the things that we believe, you never get past that. You never get past that, and it permeates your attachment style in your relationship. It creates unhealthy boundaries for how you want people to show up and exist in your life. Without that, it's just you're just running around reacting to everything that's happening to you in this anxious way, right? Because you haven't taken the time to go like, what is important to me?
Yeah.
What do I want? And then how do I put that out there to the people? I want to be treated this way. I want to show up for you this way. Right. And so if you don't do your work on your values, if you don't understand and accept that values can change, you're going to feel anxious. You're going to have
Yeah.
anxious moments consistently.
Well, then we're destined to have to seek validation from those around us. And I'll tell you a funny story really quick. This is many, many years ago now, but I have lots of eclectic friends. I've always been a person who just loves people, like interesting people. So I got like dirty biker friends, and
It's
then
the
I've got,
dancing, Pam. It's the
yeah,
dancing.
the dancing. Yeah. I've got, and then I've got really intellectual friends, and then I've got real deep yogi friends and like all of this, but they're not the people that you would typically see in a room together. And I, at times in my life, would morph into a different version of myself to fit in with whatever crowd I was in and agree with the ideologies and points of view of the crowd that I fit in. And then this is probably about 15 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. I remember having a party at my house and I invited all my eclectic friends over. I thought my insides it felt like I drank acid and they were going to come all out of me because I didn't know who to be. I'll never forget that. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I talked to my dad about it and he said, well, dear, you've always been really influenced by what other people think. And I was like, yeah, I'm
People
done.
pleasing.
Yeah. I was just like, I don't want to do that anymore. And that was the sort of the start of my progression into like really becoming a more authentic version of myself. And we're always becoming. There's no arrival point. I would never say that I'm unaffected by that kind of stuff. Certainly I am. And it was just such an awakening to go, I don't even know who to be. And that's a problem. I need to start asking what matters to me. How do I feel about this, and start acting in alignment with what comes up for me to live my most authentic life. And you know what? I would have told you I was a high functioning anxious person for a really long time, and I didn't even know it. I had no idea that I had the level of anxiety that I did. And only now I would say that, I have a pretty regulated nervous system. I get out in nature every day. I exercise all the time. I say whatever I want to say. I don't worry too much about fitting in. and I have really great tools for dealing with when anxiety arises, mostly just sitting with it and saying, okay, what are you trying to teach me?
Mm-hmm.
For anyone who's starting a journey, we gave some tools and all of that. What would you say to someone who's just said, I've tried everything and I'm still anxious? And, as a therapist, what would you say to them? Because it's not instant, is it?
Oh, I mean, we get to the point where we start struggling with the things after years of teaching our brain and our nervous system that that's how it's supposed to be. And it takes time and it takes patience. And I would just say, be patient with yourself and be gentle with yourself, and realize that what you're experiencing is part of the human experience, and you'll get there, right? Just take one step forward.
Yeah.
And when you feel safe in that step, then just take another step forward.
Yeah.
And that's a risk, right? And we look at I think we look at vulnerability research and shame research, Brene Brown type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All the good things are on the other side of that anxiety and that shame.
Mm-hmm.
All the good things that are out there for you are just one more step.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like I'm a living proof of that. I feel like I have an extraordinarily beautiful life, doing things that I love doing. And I have great people like you in my life, great friends, great family connections. All my relationships are in good shape. And that's because I took personal responsibility to deal with my own shit. And that shit was me facing the truth and learning to embrace anxiety as part of life, not letting it run me learning to live with it in harmony. So
it's a beautiful thing when you get to that point.
Isn't it? It's so great. Maybe a part of it is just because I'm old now, too.
You're not old now.
Well, Brent, thank you for being here. Can you just briefly tell people where they can find you on Instagram? And then we'll put it in the show notes too. But I want people to be able to reach out and connect to you.
Yeah, you can find me. My company name is PR Counseling and Coaching.
Mhm.
On Instagram, it's PR Counseling. My office, my physical office that I work out of, is located within Balance Point Acupuncture and Integrative Health in Kelowna, and I'm on their website. Or you can just look me up on Psychology Today, and the profile's there, and you can reach out in that way. And it would be grateful to have the opportunity to be of service to anybody who just needs someone to hold space for them and help them work through some things.
I love it. And, for all of you listening, if you never tried therapy, give it a shot. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? You've got everything to gain. I think that when we take personal responsibility for our healing, it's an investment in self. And that just says to yourself, I'm worth it. And then just making that decision is a big step toward healing.
Or thing, Pam.
Yeah, of course.
Just I appreciate being here, and just for people watching, if they don't reach out to me, that's great. Or if they do and it doesn't feel like a good fit, reach out to somebody else, because we
Yeah.
all have to find our person, and
Yeah.
it has to feel right, and it has to feel like an authentic connection working through some tough stuff. And if it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that, then maybe that's not the right person for you, and that's okay. But there's going to be somebody.
Yeah, keep going. And that's just part of not giving away the responsibility for your healing to someone else. It's keeping that responsibility within yourself and saying, yeah, this doesn't feel aligned for me, but keep going. Keep going, because on the other side of it, there's something special for you, and it's called being the real you authentically. So
Yeah.
that's all we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave your comments below and rate the show, share the show. If there's someone that can benefit from this, please share it, because my goal is to impact people in the most positive ways so we can all live more authentically, more freely. Have a beautiful day.